The door opened with a soft chime that barely cut through the low murmur of voices and clinking glass. Warm light spilled across polished floors, reflecting off crystal and silverware arranged with deliberate precision. The kind of place where people spoke softly, not out of politeness, but because money preferred quiet rooms. Every table was filled, every seat occupied by someone who looked like they belonged. Tailored jackets, watches that caught the light, confident laughter that assumed it would never be challenged. He stepped inside wearing none of that. No tailored suit. No designer shoes. Just a plain jacket, clean but unremarkable, the kind of thing no one remembered 5 minutes later. He paused for half a second, letting his eyes adjust, taking in everything without appearing to. The exits. The cameras. The way the staff moved faster near certain tables and slower near others. A hostess glanced at him, her smile practiced and shallow. She scanned him the way people did when deciding how much effort someone deserved. "Table for one?" she asked. "Yes," he replied calmly. She hesitated, just long enough to register, then grabbed a menu and led him toward the back, away from the windows, away from the best light. As they walked, he noticed how her posture changed when a well-dressed couple passed. Her shoulders straightened. Her smile widened. Then it faded again when she remembered he was still there. He didn't comment. The table was fine. Not great. Not terrible. Perfectly forgettable. He sat, placed his hands flat on the table, and waited. Around him, conversations floated in fragments. Business deals disguised as friendly chats, subtle bragging wrapped in humor, the gentle arrogance of people used to being served. A server approached quickly, not looking at his face. "Water?" the server asked. "Please." The glass arrived almost instantly, set down a little harder than necessary. No eye contact. No greeting. The server was already turning away. He opened the menu slowly, more out of habit than interest. The prices were high enough to impress but not high enough to shock. Carefully curated luxury. The illusion of exclusivity. Minutes passed. Then she arrived. She moved differently than the others. Slower, but not lazy. Careful, like every step had been calculated to avoid drawing attention. Her uniform was the same as everyone else's, but it didn't hide the tension in her shoulders or the alertness in her eyes. She held a small notepad, edges worn, fingers steady despite the strain written across her face. "Good evening," she said softly. "May I take your order?" Her voice was calm, but not empty. There was something else underneath it, awareness, maybe. Or caution. He looked up at her for the first time. Their eyes met. Something flickered there. Recognition, not of a person, but of a type. Someone who watched more than they spoke. Someone who noticed what others ignored. "I'll have the steak," he said. "Medium." She wrote it down. Her pen paused for the briefest moment. "Any sides?" she asked. "Whatever you recommend." She nodded once. "I'll be right back." As she turned away, he noticed a faint tremor in her hand, quickly controlled. Around them, laughter rose and fell, oblivious. A man at a nearby table snapped his fingers for service. Another complained loudly about the temperature of his wine. From the corner of the room, a manager watched everything with a tight smile, eyes sharp, posture rigid. When his gaze landed on her, it lingered a second too long. She returned to the kitchen doors, disappearing behind them. Time stretched. The man sipped his water and waited. He watched how certain guests were greeted by name, how others were barely acknowledged. He noticed the way plates were carried differently depending on who ordered them. He noticed how she was sent back and forth more than anyone else. When the steak finally arrived, it wasn't brought by the original server. It was her again. She approached with the plate balanced perfectly, expression neutral. As she lowered it onto the table, her fingers brushed the edge, then slid something underneath. Paper. Folded. Quick. Intentional. Her hand lingered for less than a second. "Enjoy," she said. Their eyes met again. This time, there was no mistaking it. Fear. She straightened and walked away without another word, disappearing into the flow of bodies and noise as if nothing had happened. He didn't move. The steak sizzled faintly, still hot. The smell was rich, inviting. Exactly what it was meant to be. He waited until a burst of laughter erupted from a nearby table. Until the manager turned away. Until no one was looking. Then he slid the paper free and unfolded it beneath the table. 3 short lines. Don't eat this. Upstairs office. 9:15. No signature. No explanation. His gaze lifted immediately, searching for her. He found her across the room, standing near the service station, being spoken to sharply by the manager. The man's face was tight with irritation, his finger tapping against the clipboard. She stood still, chin up, hands clasped behind her back. She didn't look at him. The manager gestured toward the floor, toward the tables. She nodded and returned to work. The clock on the wall ticked forward. 9:07. He leaned back in his chair, heart steady, mind already moving. This wasn't panic. This was calculation. Whatever she knew, she believed it was serious enough to risk her job, or worse. A server passed and glanced at his untouched plate. "Everything okay?" the server asked. "Perfect," he replied. "Just waiting." The server shrugged and walked away. Around him, the restaurant continued its performance. Wine poured. Compliments exchanged. Money assumed obedience. Across the room, she moved faster now, eyes flicking toward the stairs when she thought no one noticed. Her jaw was set. Determined. Not desperate. 9:12. The manager laughed loudly at a joke from a guest, the sound sharp and forced. He adjusted his tie, satisfied. Confident. He checked his watch. 9:14. He stood. The chair scraped softly against the floor, unnoticed. He picked up his jacket and walked toward the staircase marked staff only, his pulse calm, his steps unhurried. Behind him, the steak remained untouched, cooling under the lights. At the top of the stairs, a door waited, slightly ajar. Inside, the truth was already breathing. And whatever it was, she had just placed it in his hands. The stairs creaked under his weight, each step muffled by thick carpet that had absorbed years of hurried footsteps and overheard secrets. He paused at the top, listening. Voices drifted from behind closed doors, low, irritated, confident. The kind of voices that assumed no one was listening because no one ever dared to. He didn't open the door. Not yet. Downstairs, the room shifted without realizing why. A subtle imbalance, like a missing note in a familiar song. The waitress moved through tables with a tight focus now, her awareness sharpened by the ticking clock inside her head. Every glance from the manager felt heavier. Every step felt watched. A guest at the bar snapped his fingers again. "Hey! Mississippi!" She turned instantly. "Yes, sir?" "This took too long," he said, gesturing to his empty glass. "I'm not used to waiting." "I apologize," she replied evenly, already reaching for the bottle. As she poured, he leaned closer than necessary. "You people really need better training." The words landed hard, sharp enough to draw a few glances. No one said anything. Someone laughed quietly, as if it were harmless. Her hand didn't shake. "I'll let management know," she said. He smirked. "Good." She stepped away, jaw clenched, and nearly collided with the manager. "What are you doing?" he hissed under his breath. "Do you want complaints?" "I'm doing my job," she replied quietly. He leaned closer, voice low and dangerous. "Then act like it. You already stand out enough." She met his eyes. Just for a moment. Something passed between them, defiance, history, unspoken truth. Then she looked away and returned to the floor. In the kitchen, tension simmered. Pans clanged louder than usual. A cook muttered under his breath. Someone cursed softly when a plate slipped. "Inspector's coming next month," one of them said. "Doesn't matter," another replied. "Paperwork's clean." She heard it all as she passed, carrying plates she didn't trust, serving food she knew shouldn't be served. Her chest tightened with every step. She checked the clock again. 9:18. Upstairs, the man pressed his ear lightly against the office door. He caught fragments, numbers, shipments, dates. Careless confidence. He recorded everything silently, his phone hidden, his expression unchanged. He reached for the handle. It turned. The room inside was smaller than expected, cluttered with files stacked carelessly, a desk scarred by years of use. A faint smell of spoiled meat lingered beneath the overpowering scent of air freshener. Someone inside froze. "What the hell are you doing here?" a voice demanded. He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind him. Downstairs, a glass shattered. The sound echoed just long enough to draw attention. Heads turned. Conversations paused. The waitress stood frozen, shards at her feet, red wine seeping into the carpet like a spreading stain. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly, already kneeling to clean it up. The manager rushed over, face flushed. "Are you serious?" "It was an accident," she said. "Of course it was," he snapped. "Every time." A hush settled over nearby tables. Eyes lingered. Judgment bloomed freely when people felt entertained. "That's enough," the manager said loudly. "Go. Now." She looked up. "I still have." "I said go." Silence followed her as she stood, hands trembling now despite her effort. She removed her apron slowly, folded it carefully, and placed it on the service station. Her breath felt shallow, sharp. As she walked toward the back, a few guests avoided looking at her. One woman whispered something into her partner's ear. Another shook his head like he'd witnessed something inevitable. She reached the hallway leading to the stairs. And stopped. The office door was open. Inside, raised voices spilled out, no longer controlled. "You think this disappears because you want it to?" the man upstairs said, his voice calm but unyielding. "You don't know who you're dealing with," someone shot back. "This place runs because of us." "No," he replied. "It runs because people like her stay quiet." Her heart slammed against her ribs. Footsteps thundered behind her. The manager rounded the corner, face twisted with anger. "What are you still doing here?" She didn't answer. Because he was already stepping out of the office. The room seemed to shrink around him. Conversations died instantly. Every eye locked onto the man who now stood between two worlds, one of power assumed, the other of power revealed. The manager's confidence faltered. "Sir, there's been a misunderstanding." "I'm aware," the man said calmly. "Of more than you think." The manager forced a laugh. "If there's an issue, we can discuss it privately." "We already did," he replied. A uniformed figure appeared behind him on the stairs. Then another. Whispers rippled through the dining room. "What's happening? Is this a raid?" The waitress stood still, heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. She hadn't planned this part. Hadn't imagined it would move this fast. The manager's voice dropped. "You set this up." "No," the man said. "You did. Over years." Sirens sounded faintly outside. The guests shifted uncomfortably now, suddenly aware that they were no longer spectators. The illusion of safety cracked. The manager turned sharply toward her, eyes blazing. "You!" She met his gaze without flinching. "I tried to tell someone," she said quietly. For a moment it looked like he might lunge at her. Instead, hands grabbed his arms. The room erupted into noise. As officials began moving through the restaurant, the man turned toward her. Their eyes met again, this time without fear, but with something heavier. "This isn't over yet," he said. Her breath caught. Not a threat. A promise. Because whatever came next would decide everything. The room felt smaller now, crowded not just with bodies but with the weight of consequences. Jackets marked with authority moved through the restaurant with quiet efficiency, their presence stripping the place of its practiced elegance. Tables were abandoned mid-conversation, half-filled glasses forgotten. The music had stopped, leaving only the low hum of voices and the scrape of shoes against the floor. She stood near the service station, hands clasped in front of her, trying to steady her breathing. Everything she had feared was unfolding faster than she'd imagined. Too fast to take back. Too loud to hide from. One of the officials approached her gently. "We're going to need to ask you some questions." She nodded. "I'll answer everything." Across the room, the man watched her closely. Not like an observer. Like someone measuring the cost of a decision already made. The manager sat slumped in a chair, wrists restrained, his earlier confidence completely gone. His eyes darted from face to face, searching for an escape that no longer existed. When his gaze landed on her, it hardened with resentment. "You think this ends well for you?" he muttered as an officer guided him past. She met his stare calmly. "I think it ends honestly." Upstairs, the office was being dismantled piece by piece. Files pulled from drawers. Boxes opened. Screens photographed. A uniformed inspector held up a ledger, flipping through pages that didn't match the dates stamped on the covers. "These logs are altered," the inspector said. "Multiple times." Another officer nodded. "So are these shipment records." The man stood nearby, arms crossed, listening. He had seen this pattern too many times before. Clean fronts. Rotten cores. Systems built to reward silence and punish anyone who spoke. One of the inspectors turned to him. "If you hadn't come in tonight..." He shook his head. "If she hadn't written that note, none of this would matter." Downstairs, she answered questions steadily. How long she'd worked there. What she'd noticed. When the problems began. She didn't exaggerate. Didn't soften anything either. She spoke with clarity born of long restraint finally released. "I used to audit places like this," she said quietly. "Before one mistake followed me everywhere." The official paused. "You were in compliance?" "Yes." That earned a look of surprise. "Then why?" "Because no one hires you after you've been marked," she replied. "Not even when you're right." The official wrote something down, expression thoughtful. Across the room, the man listened as well. The pieces slid together. Her attention to detail. The way she moved. The way she'd known exactly what to write and when. Later, when the questions paused, he approached her. "You didn't just suspect," he said softly. "You knew." She exhaled. "I recognized the patterns. The shortcuts. The lies. And you stayed." "I needed proof," she replied. "And I needed someone who could act on it." He studied her face. There was no triumph there. No relief. Just exhaustion and resolve. "You put yourself at risk," he said. She met his eyes. "So did the people eating that food." Outside, the flashing lights painted the building in harsh colors. Cameras hovered at the edges now, reporters murmuring into microphones, speculating wildly. The story was already escaping into the world, morphing with every retelling. An officer approached the man. "We've identified multiple violations that go beyond negligence. Criminal charges are likely." "Good," he said. The officer hesitated. "Your name will come out." "I know." He looked back at her. She was watching the chaos with a strange calm, as if the storm had already passed through her long before tonight. They moved her upstairs briefly, away from the noise, into a quieter room while statements were finalized. She sat, hands resting in her lap, staring at the wall. For the first time since she'd slipped the note under the plate, the adrenaline drained away. Her hands began to shake. She pressed them together, breathing slowly, counting silently until the tremor eased. The door opened. He stepped inside and closed it gently behind him. "They're going to tear this place apart," he said. "Every location. Every record." She nodded. "They should." He leaned against the desk. "You understand what this means for you?" "I already lost everything once," she replied. "If that's the price, I can live with it." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket and placed his phone on the desk between them. "I didn't just record tonight," he said. "I recorded the last 3 months. Quiet visits. Patterns. I suspected something was wrong before I walked in. Her eyes widened slightly. Then why come alone? Because systems like this only reveal themselves when they think they're safe, he replied. And because I needed to see who would speak up. She absorbed that, her throat tightening. I wasn't sure you would, she admitted. He smiled faintly. Neither was I. There was a knock at the door. An official poked his head in. We're ready for final statements. He nodded. We'll be right there. When the door closed again, the room felt heavy with what was about to change. You did more than stop one night of bad food, he said quietly. You exposed a culture. She looked down. I just didn't want anyone else to get hurt. That's never just, he replied. Downstairs, the restaurant looked nothing like it had an hour earlier. Chairs were stacked. Tables bare. The illusion completely dismantled. Officials moved with purpose, documenting everything. The manager was escorted out last, his earlier arrogance replaced by something smaller and meaner. As he passed her, he leaned in as close as the officers allowed. You think they'll protect you? He whispered. People forget. She didn't respond. Because she wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the man standing a few steps away, speaking quietly into his phone, issuing instructions that shifted the balance of power in ways no one else in the room could match. She finally understood the full weight of what she'd done. Not just who she'd warned, but who she trusted. As the doors closed behind the last official and the flashing lights continued outside, he turned back toward her. This goes public in the morning, he said. And when it does, there's no going back. She squared her shoulders. I'm ready. He held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. So am I. Because the truth was out now. And the world was about to choose what to do with it. Morning light revealed what the night had hidden. The restaurant looked smaller in daylight, stripped of its carefully managed shadows and flattering glow. Yellow tape crossed the entrance. Signs announced temporary closure. A few people stood across the street, phones raised, whispering as if the building itself might hear them. She stood on the sidewalk, coat pulled tight around her, watching inspectors move in and out with boxes. The adrenaline was gone now. What remained was a quiet, aching fatigue that settled deep in her bones. Every choice she had made was finally catching up to her, all at once. A reporter approached, microphone held forward. Are you the employee who tipped off authorities? She hesitated, then shook her head gently. I'm just someone who didn't want anyone else hurt. The reporter pressed for more, but an officer stepped in, guiding her away. She didn't resist. She didn't need to explain herself to strangers anymore. Across the street, he stood speaking calmly to a small group of officials. There was no press conference. No grand statement. Just quiet authority. Decisions being made. Calls being placed. She watched him finish and walked toward her. They're done here, he said. At least for now. She nodded. What happens next? The chain is suspended pending investigation, he replied. Every location. Every supplier. The executives resigned an hour ago. She exhaled slowly, the weight lifting in a way she hadn't expected. And the people who got sick? They'll have answers, he said. And support. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Traffic passed. The city moved on, unaware of how close it had come to something worse. I should go, she said quietly. He looked at her. Where? She shrugged. Anywhere that isn't here. He reached into his jacket and handed her a card. Plain. No logo. Just a number. Call me before you decide, he said. She hesitated, then took it. I don't want favors. This isn't one, he replied. It's an invitation. She slipped the card into her pocket and walked away without looking back, her steps steady despite the uncertainty ahead. The story broke by noon. Headlines focused on contamination, corruption, negligence. Photos of the restaurant flooded screens. Commentators debated responsibility. Analysts dissected timelines. Somewhere deep in the coverage, a brief mention appeared, an anonymous employee whose actions prevented further harm. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from former coworkers. From people she barely remembered. Some thanking her. Some warning her. A few accusing her of betrayal. She turned it off. That night she sat alone in her small apartment, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. The silence felt different now. Less heavy. Still uncertain but honest. She replayed everything in her mind, the note, the look in his eyes, the moment she decided not to stay quiet. Her phone buzzed once more. A single message. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. If you're willing. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she replied, I'll be there. The office wasn't grand. No marble floors. No intimidating views. Just clean lines, open space, sunlight pouring through wide windows. People moved with purpose, but without fear. She was led into a conference room where he waited, coffee already poured. You don't have to do this, he said as she sat. I know, she replied. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents, neatly organized. A position, he said. Compliance. Oversight. Independent authority. You'd answer directly to the board. She flipped through the pages, heart pounding. Why me? Because you didn't stay quiet when it would have been easier, he replied. And because you understand the cost of doing the right thing. She closed the folder slowly. And my record? It stays where it belongs, he said. In the past. Tears threatened, unexpected and unwelcome. She blinked them back. People like me don't usually get second chances. They should, he said simply. She sighed. Weeks passed. The restaurant never reopened. The building was sold. The staff scattered. Lawsuits followed. Settlements were reached. Policies changed quietly across the industry. She worked long hours now, traveling, auditing, questioning. She was firm but fair. Uncompromising without being cruel. Places that had relied on silence found it harder to hide. Sometimes, people recognized her. You're the waitress, they'd say. She'd smile politely. I was. One evening, she found herself in a different restaurant. Smaller. Honest. No illusion of luxury. Just good food and open kitchens. She ordered steak. Medium. When the plate arrived, she smiled at the server and said, Thank you. Nothing was slipped underneath. Nothing needed to be. Across the room, her phone buzzed. A message from him. Still changing the world? She typed back. One kitchen at a time. He replied almost instantly. Dinner soon? She paused, then smiled. Yes. As she set the phone down, she realized something important. The night she slipped that note under a stranger's plate, she hadn't just warned someone powerful. She had reclaimed her own voice. And that was the part no headline could ever capture. Because sometimes justice doesn't arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives folded neatly, passed hand to hand, and trusted at exactly the right moment.